Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Inside, or Inside TCO Performance Center. Matthew Coller here, along with Will Ragatz of Sports Illustrated, and we have just walked off of the field inside the TCO Performance Center facility here after watching Sam Darnold, J.J. McCarthy, and the entire Minnesota Vikings perform an OTA practice, and boy, do we have takeaways. Maybe dozens. This could be a long podcast. I hope you don't have a lot to write, because there is so much to take away from this one practice that we got to see that you might have to write your family, tell them you're not going to be around for a little while. No, I'm kidding, but sort of not. There's a lot to get to here, starting with, Will, the fact that we saw J.J. McCarthy as QB 3-ish, 3 or 4, working with the backup players. Well, Sam Darnold and Nick Mullens worked with the starters today at practice. What was your opinion of J.J. McCarthy not working in and out with Sam Darnold, but instead Darnold and Mullens being 1 and 2, and then on the other side of the field with the 3s and 4s, that's where the rookie J.J. McCarthy was practicing?
Yeah, it's kind of a boring take, but I wasn't too surprised. I mean, Mike Zimmer did this. Kevin O'Connell's done this. I think basically every NFL coach does this, where you make the rookies earn their way up. And J.J. McCarthy was the highest drafted quarterback in Vikings history, but he's also just a rookie. He's 21 years old. It makes sense to me that if you're grouping of their 4 quarterbacks, Sam Darnold and Nick Mullens are the veterans, the guys who have been around for a while. Jaron Hall and J.J. McCarthy are the young guys who still have a lot to learn. That's not to say, by any means, it's May 21st today, something like that, that J.J. McCarthy can't or won't work his way up over the course of the rest of the spring, during training camp, which is where it'll start to really get interesting to monitor who's getting what level of reps. That's in late July and into August, and then we got the preseason games. And right now, this was our first look at a full team practice for the 2024 Minnesota Vikings. And I wasn't surprised to see McCarthy kind of working in as 3. I think there were a couple moments where they went from 7-on-7 to 11-on-11, back to 7-on-7. At one point, it was Darnold, and then I thought I saw McCarthy as the second guy. But for the most part, he was third behind Mullens and working on the other half of the field with all the young players.
Well, something important to remember is that everyone else is practicing and learning too. So if you're asking somebody who's a rookie that doesn't know the offense yet, doesn't know the footwork, when we talked to Wes Phillips, he said that they're teaching him how to have his left foot up in the shotgun as opposed to either spread wide or his right foot up in the shotgun, which he may have done before. Sorry, I didn't take note of that in the film study about McCarthy, but it's different. Whatever way it was before, it's different with how his foot is being put on the stance for the shotgun, which tells you just where we're at with this process, that it is going to be a long development process over the summer, and it also may go into the season, and it may go all the way through the season. We don't really know that yet. As you said, it is very common to have all young players working on the side, although Dallas Turner was with the top defense right away, so we can throw that out there. But especially for a quarterback, you want everyone. You want Jordan Addison, and we'll get to Justin Jefferson not being here, don't worry. You want Addison, you want Brandon Powell, you want the offensive line, you want all those guys to get a lot out of this practice rather than having to stop and say, all right, JJ, this is how the play works. This is how your footwork works, everything else, where when you're working with the 3s and the 4s, there's much more time to be able to do that. And it gets him a lot of reps instead of standing behind Sam Darnold and watching Darnold go rep after rep and then Mullens mixes in. Instead, now it's rep. Okay, Jaron Hall gets 1, 3 more passes for McCarthy, so he can get a lot more work. But if you were writing out a depth chart today, it would have Darnold easily number 1, Mullens number 2, and then McCarthy number 3, which, as you mentioned, doesn't have a lot of significance, and yet at the same time would not be terribly shocking if that's how week 1 started, just knowing how slowly they want to take it with McCarthy. I think what we saw today was simply evidence that they were telling the truth, that they want to take it slow with McCarthy.
Yeah, no, they definitely do, and it's going to be on him, and this is what has been reported and been said all along. It's going to be on him if he wants to move up that depth chart. That's not going to be handed to him. He's going to have to show that he can meet these certain benchmarks of readiness and of mastering the offense and just timing and rhythm and getting the ball out and just putting it in the playmaker's hands, because that's what their quarterback has to do in this offense. So, yeah, it could be a later OTA this spring where we see him move up. It could be, I think that's less likely. It probably, if it's going to happen this year, it's sometime later in training camp. It's sometime during the season. I floated the idea that they could trade Nick Mullins because you have four quarterbacks now, and I don't know where Mullins really fits into. Like, is he just the kind of experienced third quarterback eventually? I don't know what you could get back for him, but I think he's valuable to have because you never know if guys are going to get hurt or whatever. Look at what happened last year. And Mullins, it was funny. We came out and like his first two passes in the OTA today, he's just ripping it deep. Like he's trying to find Brandon Powell in double coverage, and it's like, all right. Nick Mullins, he's a fun guy to have around because he is just an absolute gunslinger. But, yeah, I think McCarthy, he looked all right today. You can see some of the things that they're sold on, which is the mobility, getting outside of the pocket, just kind of the zip that he has when he throws the ball. And then there were a couple moments he dropped a shotgun snap for a fumble. There were a couple misses that were a little high or a little off or whatever it was. And he looks like a rookie, and he looks like a rookie with a lot of upside. But then you watch Sam Darnold, who, I mean, is really kind of getting overlooked in a lot of ways in this process. And Wes Phillips said it. Like, this guy was the number 3 overall pick in his draft for a reason. The arm talent's been evident from day one. And we watch him, and you're talking about just all the zip that he throws with. Not to overuse that word, but the ball really just kind of comes out of his hand quickly. And so you see, I don't know, what I've been thinking about since they signed Darnold is all of the arguments that people make about the environment being so great for a rookie quarterback, which is true, that also applies to a guy like Sam Darnold, who has never been in this kind of system with these surroundings before in his career. So to me, I mean, you can talk me into, especially after seeing him throw live today, you could talk me into the Sam Darnold kind of Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith type of year, even if it's maybe not quite to that level, just with the pieces that are around him and with the arm talent that's always been there.
Just to answer the fundamental question of a podcast after an OTA practice as far as how did J.J. look, in my opinion, there were some plays where it was clearly slow in understanding where he was supposed to go with the football. He got yelled at by the coaches a little bit, like welcome to an NFL practice where you're not supposed to be scrambling on a particular play. You're supposed to let it rip into a window. But these are all the things that you got to figure out. When can you throw that ball? What's the timing on a particular play? Where was that read supposed to go? That you just need a lot of reps. So there was a couple times where I thought there was a bit of a delay, a bit of am I supposed to throw it here? And then he would let it go. Or I think I'm supposed to throw it. No, I'm going to scramble instead, which you shouldn't really be scrambling ever on a 7-on-7 unless it's really the right. There's no pressure. So I don't know when that is appropriate to do. There's supposed to be maybe a clock in your head where, all right, you get to some point, you'd have to be scrambling here. Mm-hmm. But the point is that 7-on-7s are designed to drop back and throw the ball. And there were a few times where he was rolling or scrambling, and it didn't seem like that was what was supposed to happen. There was also an out route that was right in front of us that came right into our grills on the sideline from Lucky Jackson. I would say there's about 15, 20 yards down the field where McCarthy dropped back, put his foot in the ground, and let it rip right on the money to Jackson, who was coming past, I think it was Lewis Seen, who got beat a couple of times today and dropped an interception, but we're not concerned about that. Your point was Nick Mullins. It was Robert Tonyan where he really let one go in the back shoulder, throwing deep down the field. But as far as McCarthy, I thought it would probably look like this. I would have been really impressed if it's all on time and he's just dropping back, hitting that back foot and letting it go. It didn't look like that. It probably won't look like that for a while. It almost never looks like that for a new quarterback. So if we get into, think about fans of The Matrix, the first time, you've seen The Matrix?
Yes.
Okay. So the first time that they're asking him to jump over the buildings, and they're like, oh, he's the chosen one. He's going to jump over the buildings. And then he falls. And they're like, okay, so he's, maybe not. I don't know if he's chosen one. We can't decide that today. As far as how Darnold looked, he did throw a couple of picks. It's a practice, whatever. But there was a rollout play to his left where he had to snap the hips and let it go. And the ball hit Tristan Jackson so hard we could hear it across the facility. It just went like boom, like it nailed him. So to your point, Darnold looked pretty comfortable running an offense, and his football was coming out pretty darn strong. And if you're comparing the two and how they looked at a practice, you would say one's a veteran quarterback who has a lot of talent, and the other one's a rookie, and it's not even remotely close right now. And I think it's going to be fun to watch how close it gets. Does it get close in the middle of training camp? Or do we see him get these number 2 reps in minicamp instead of Mullins? Or is he consistently back with the number 3s because they're taking it slow?
Hey, this is fun. We haven't had something like this in a while. We had to cling to the backup quarterback competition between Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion or whoever it was. And Kirk Cousins was always the unquestioned starter, and you knew what you're getting out of Kirk Cousins. And there were varying things with different offensive coordinators during his time and different systems. But now we have a true kind of quarterback competition and a situation to watch unfold. And it was nice to be here today and have the kind of starting point of, it's tough to really see a whole lot in these OTAs, these 7-on-7, 11-on-11, where they're not going full contact or anything. I mean, they're going close to full speed, but it's not the same level as what it will be when we get into training camp. So it'll be cool to watch that unfold throughout OTAs and mandatory minicamp, and then into training camp, which I think the fans are going to be really excited about, just coming out and seeing Darnold and McCarthy and those two primarily, and some Mullins and Hall mixed in as well. But just, how close can J.J. McCarthy get to really start to make it a potential decision for Kevin O'Connell? Because I think we're all assuming Sam Darnold's probably going to be the week 1 starter. And then it's a question of, is it McCarthy after the bye coming out and playing the Lions in week 6? Or is it McCarthy sometime in November or December? Is it McCarthy in 2025? And that'll all depend on it'll depend on how McCarthy does, more so I think than even what the results are with Sam Darnold. Like, it's if Darnold comes out and he's the Sam Darnold that he's been for most of his career and he isn't very successful, they're not just going to put McCarthy in there because to make a spark or whatever. It's going to have to be McCarthy is ready, because they are taking a overhead 5, 10, 15-year view of things with J.J. McCarthy, and you don't want to put him out there before he's ready and risk having their hands be dirty, as Kwesi said, and maybe doing anything that's going to mess up his development in any way. And that's probably what happened to Sam Darnold when he was with the Jets and then going to the Panthers and all these different things that he talked about today. There's a lot that goes into his career and the pressure of being drafted highly. And the Vikings want to make sure that they do right by J.J. McCarthy and give him the best chance to succeed. So I don't know. I think I was impressed in some moments with McCarthy where you're like, okay, yeah, there's the arm talent. You can see that out route that you mentioned to Lucky Jackson was one of those kind of wow moments. And then there's a lot of times where, as you also mentioned, he's going to his first read and that's not there, and he's going to the second one, and I don't know if I can rip that. And then you're trying to get to the third, and then at this point, like, if it were an NFL play, you got to get out of the pocket. So he's going through some of that, the kind of finding the timing of the progressions, the rhythm, the decisiveness. And yeah, it's May, so we shouldn't expect that to be super well oiled right now, but you can see the upside with him just from a tool standpoint.
So there is a milkshake bet on the board with the quarterback situation between myself and Dane Mizutani. Now, this was his proposal, so I just took it to take it because it's a milkshake bet. Why not? He thinks, though, that J.J. McCarthy will be QB2 to start week 1. It'll be Darnold starting, QB2 McCarthy. And so I took Nick Mullins as QB2. I don't think that it would make sense to trade him because he's the guy that knows the offense and because he has been a backup quarterback. He's won games in the league before. I don't love my odds here, but I also think as far as developmental quarterbacks go that Jordan Love was not QB2 right away with the Green Bay Packers, not in week 1, because they felt that Tim Boyle maybe? Tim Boyle was more prepared, and nobody thought Tim Boyle was a better quarterback as far as talent goes, but they thought he was more prepared to be the backup for that particular week. whose side would you take for that bet just today? And it just doesn't have to be definitive. You don't have to lose the bet. I do. But where would you put that money? And then I want to talk more about Darnold.
I'd almost be inclined to take your side because I think you can make the case that McCarthy's either QB1 or he's QB3. Because if he's ready to play and viewed ready to play, he could start week 1. I don't think that's by any means out of the question. I mean, they gave Sam Darnold $10 million, but Sam Darnold has not lit it up in the NFL, and he's coming into the best circumstances that he's ever had. But it's a bar that I think is potentially clearable by J.J. McCarthy, who, yes, is 21 and needs some development, but there were a lot of things on the tape at Michigan where you're like, oh, that could translate pretty quickly. So I wouldn't bet on him being QB1, but I think if he's not QB1, it makes more sense to have him as QB3, as that inactive emergency third guy, kind of what like Jaron Hall was early on last season, and not be the QB2 where you're one injury away from being thrust into there. I think that could change if, for example, Mullins were to get traded for a conditional 6th-round draft pick or something like that. Then you would probably have McCarthy be the 2, and unless something changes with Jaron Hall. But I don't know. I think you could make the case where if he's not QB1 and you don't think he's ready, then you don't want him to be a snap away from playing because you don't think he's ready. So you don't want him to be one injury away from being forced in there and maybe playing before his development suggests that he should be playing. So I could see taking your side where if he's not QB1, and I don't think he will be. I don't know what my pie chart of that would be just yet, but then he maybe is QB3, so there's no situation where he gets thrust in there unless 2 guys get hurt, but that's probably not going to happen.
So the best part of doing podcasts where we only get 1 practice a week is I forget what I said the last time. And when we talked about the percentage chance that J.J. McCarthy starts, like, I don't remember what percentage I said, and I didn't go back and look. After today, I was maybe sitting at 25% chance that he starts.
I was just going to say like 20.
20?
But 25, that's a more round number, 1/4. Yeah.
I think about 1 and 4. I mean, with a first-round pick who's as talented as J.J. McCarthy, you could see quick development. Mm-hmm. Because as of right now, it's not close, but I wouldn't have expected it to be close with someone who's played so many NFL games as Sam Darnold, who I want to talk a little more about. The only angle that really exists on Sam Darnold is, hey, maybe the situation is so good that he won't be bad and he'll play pretty well and they could be competitive. What I saw today was a very confident-looking pro quarterback, lining people up, throwing it to the right places, even just like taking the snap, rolling out, running a bootleg, throwing it when he's supposed to throw it. It just had that rhythm to it that you expect from someone who's done this many times, and I thought he looked pretty good today with the way that he threw the football. Is there any other angle, though, with Darnold? Because I feel the same way as probably everyone else does, which is I like that they brought in someone who is mature. We heard from him today. You could tell he might, what is he, 26? But, he's a grown-up. He's a veteran pro quarterback, the way that he handles himself. I think that's a good guy for McCarthy. They went to a Wolves game together, and it seems like he's very much accepted where he's supposed to be in this world. That this is a last chance for him as a starter, but it's also a situation where he's got someone else that he knows the team cares about their future. Is there anything else to say about Sam Darnold other than, hey, look, if he starts, he could probably win some games?
The Darnold case of the top tier outcome for him being like the Baker Mayfield thing is, I mean, they literally were on the same team in 2022 with the Carolina Panthers, and Baker Mayfield was terrible with the Panthers, and then they went to so Baker started the first 6 games or something, and then they went to PJ Walker for a while, and he wasn't very good. And then Darnold played like the last 5 games, and it was a bad team, so you're like, how much does that really matter? But I mean, they're real NFL regular season games, and he put together the best stretch of play in his career. He wasn't lighting things up completely, but it's compared to what he had done the previous year with Carolina, his first few years with the Jets, it was like, okay, he's taking care of the football a little bit. He's making some nice throws. So that's the most recent time we've seen him in any sort of extended stretch, and it was the best play of his career. And then last year he goes and he's the backup or QB3 or whatever in San Francisco, where he's learning under Kyle Shanahan, and he's learning that West Coast offense. And now he said today, I mean, translating that over, it's new verbiage and terms and all that stuff, but it's a lot of the same kind of formations and concepts. So that year under Shanahan has helped kind of ease this transition a little bit. I think that's the case is a guy who the last time we saw him in 2022 was playing the best football of his career, then had this kind of learning like mid-career redshirt year last year, and now could potentially come out and take advantage of the best offensive environment that he's ever been around with a great coaching staff. He's getting to work with quarterback coach Josh McCown, who is his teammate, and he said like his best friend his rookie year when he was the youngest guy in the Jets and McCown was the oldest guy in the Jets. So just a lot of the environmental stuff, you can kind of talk yourself into the absolute high-end outcome being something like what we saw from Baker Mayfield last year, which was a Pro Bowl quarterback who just got paid, like $30 million a year this offseason.
There's kind of a question there with Sam Darnold.
To be clear, I don't think that is a likely outcome. That is within the wide range of potential outcomes.
Everything from this team is in the playoffs with Sam Darnold to we never see him play because J.J. McCarthy wins the job.
It's all possible.
As you mentioned, that's what makes this so interesting right now, and the most interesting that they've been at this point of the year in a very long time. But the question kind of comes down to how screwed do you think Sam Darnold was by the teams that acquired him? The Jets, the Panthers. I mean, obviously not the 49ers. I think it speaks highly of him that he went there, won the backup job when I believe they would have preferred it to be Trey Lance. But
yeah, he was the QB too. That's right.
You're right. And then they trade away Trey Lance and not to the Vikings. Now that would have made things really interesting around here had they done that. But I think that in New York, he was epically screwed over. Going to one of the worst franchises with bad weapons. They immediately turned to one of the worst coaches in the league. And then I just cannot tell you how not prepared for the NFL Matt Rule was. I mean, one of the worst coaching hires of the last 15 years in the NFL. And then goes out to San Francisco. The game he plays in, he looks pretty comfortable. He throws the ball well. It's a small sample. I think that screwed percentage is very high. Like one of the most unfortunately placed quarterbacks. But now look, if it's Joe Burrow, he went to a bad franchise as well, but he went to maybe better coaching, receivers. I don't think that you could be so great that you just say, screw all that. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter, right? But when it's someone like Darnold who could go either way, that environment has an especially large impact, I think, on success. So what we're going to see, and maybe we already saw with him throwing to Jordan Addison, for example, is this might be the best receiver you've had other than the small sample with DJ Moore. Like, wow, that's really saying something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's your wide receiver too, assuming that just Jefferson shows up at some point, which we assume that he will.
In a second.
Yeah. Can you think of an example of somebody who's come in and had like that level of poor coaching and overcome that? I mean, was it Adam Gase and Matt Rule being his coaches? I mean, even Trevor Lawrence, who was like viewed as a generational prospect, he was really hurt by the Urban Meyer thing, I think, and that's still, I think, affecting some of the perception of Trevor Lawrence heading into this year. And he, as a number one overall pick and a guy I think is still going to be able to figure it out and has kind of gotten past that, but he probably would have liked to have a little smoother start to his career. And Gase and Rule are right up there almost with, they're not to the Urban Meyer level of dysfunction, but they're not that far off. So it is a tough way to start your career. And Darnold just had to be elated by the opportunity to come join this team this year and work with Kevin O'Connell and work with Josh McCown and throw to Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and all these guys. And the two tackles are really good. And it's just, like I said, everything that we've said about what it'll mean for J.J. McCarthy at some point, whether that's week 1 or week 10 or next year, that will also benefit Sam Darnold in a lot of ways. So if there was ever going to be a situation for Sam Darnold to resurrect his career, I mean, it feels like this is the right one because, yeah, the other side of it is like all these quarterbacks we see come into the league and have success. Burrow and Zach Taylor, like Mahomes and Andy Reid, C.J. Stroud with DeMeco Ryans and Bobby Slowick. Like, there's just a lot of examples where, I mean, Josh Allen and Sean McDermott and Brian Dable.
Yeah, Dable. Yeah.
Just a lot of good examples of if you have good coaching with you, that's going to help a ton. And Darnold, up until last year, just hadn't had that.
I'm interested. After seeing him today, I'm a little more interested because I thought he looked pretty good. Justin Jefferson's not here. Maybe you've heard. Maybe you've seen someone on the internet swap him in a jersey with the New York Jets, or you saw that some clown tweeted that he was in New York or something, which, by the way, a player wouldn't do a visit to a team before they were going to be traded there. So if you're going to tweet out a bogus rumor, at least make it make sense. Anyway,
you can't just, while under contract, go like visit another team.
No, you can't.
It's not a thing.
Doesn't have a key fob to get into the Jets building. Anyway, the point is they're not trading him to the Jets or anybody else. They will sign Justin Jefferson to a contract extension at some point. I don't know when. And that becomes increasingly difficult as we go forward because we are in Minnesota, and no matter how good the Wolves are, people will still believe that bad things are just ready to happen to all of these teams. But all I can say is, once again, deep breaths. You and I, this very same time of year last year, had this very same conversation where we're like, next year we could be talking about no contract extension and deep breaths. It's still the same way. I'm looking at minicamp as a possibility. If he misses minicamp, then the tension ramps up. Mm-hmm. Right now, in my opinion, the tension, it is voluntary, organized teams activities. The tension should be very, very small at a 2. If he misses, mini camp, it's $100,000 fine or so. Maybe it goes up to about 5 or 6. And then if we get to starting training camp, well, all right, now the pressure's up and now we're really going to have all of our antennas up. What's going on here on a daily basis? You start to miss practices, but we are quite some time from then. So we wait. And that's all I can really say about it. And just don't search his name on Twitter because you're just going to get a bunch of toxic, bogus nonsense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had people ask me like, "Hey, what's going on with Jefferson? What's going on here?" And I just, there's nothing to report. We're just gonna have to be patient with this one. Nothing changed with him not showing up to OTAs. If you've been following the Vikings closely, you knew that he wasn't coming to OTAs because he didn't come to OTAs last year. So he wasn't going to come to OTAs this year. He's a superstar. He doesn't need to be at OTAs, quite frankly. Last year he showed up to mandatory minicamp. So that's the first time this year that we will take note if that's not the case or if it is the case. I understand why it's news yesterday that Adam Schefter tweets out because he's Justin Jefferson and he's the best receiver in football and he doesn't have a new contract. So, you know what? Sure, it's newsworthy that he wasn't here, but if you were following it at all, you knew that he wasn't going to be here. So nothing has changed. We have to wait. We'll see if he's here for mandatory minicamp. We'll see if he shows up for training camp. If he doesn't show up for mandatory minicamp, maybe he could do the Danielle Hunter hold in where you come to training camp and then you just don't really do anything, but you avoid the fines and you can make up some reason why you're not doing anything that, well, clearly it's the contract, but you don't have to.
What do you mean, like a back injury?
Like TJ Hawkinson last year? Yeah, you don't have to say that it's because of the contract. Yeah, the ear, that was something. So yeah, all I can do is tell everybody that be patient with this. It is a massive contract negotiation situation where he is more than likely going to become the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, making at least $35 million a year, something like that. And I know people will be like, what's the holdup? There's just a lot on both sides where you're trying to meet in the middle. I think guaranteed money and structure are big things there. And it's just something that's going to take time. And a lot of times you see these big extensions happen closer to the start of the regular season. So yeah, all I can say is be patient with this one.
It just doesn't benefit anyone in media at all to say that. And so we put it 28 minutes into the podcast because it can't lead unless it's a little more dramatic, I would say. And then so that is, I think, the 365 nature of football. It's the power of social media that drama and things like that are always going to move the needle a lot more than just saying, well, let's just wait and see. There is a moment where you can start to say, what is going on here? But that moment is not now.
We have not gotten that.
And when that moment gets here, then I will say, what is going on here? It will be pretty notable if he doesn't come to mandatory minicamp, because that will be different. It will deviate from last year when he did come to minicamp as they were starting their negotiation process, and that's when the team can find him. We've also seen guys with contract issues show up at mandatory minicamp, but they don't do anything. That could be another option for Justin Jefferson. Go to the meetings, be involved, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense for him to go run around on a field. And if there's any potential that someone could get injured, as we saw from Teddy Bridgewater once upon a time, it's just not very wise to do. I don't think at this point it would be a, hey, bleep you team or whatever, I'm playing hardball, as much as it's just not very smart to show up and go out there and start practicing. So
and it is, to be fair, a different situation than last year where he had the 2 years left on the rookie contract.
Yes.
Now we are literally going into the contract year, the final year of his rookie contract, the 5th year option. So yeah, he doesn't have the security beyond that. So there's no upside for him to come and practice until a deal gets done. I still remain of the belief that this is going to get done because the Vikings want to get it done and keep him around as the face of their franchise for a long time. You just drafted the rookie quarterback, so you can have the rookie quarterback contract and you can pay Justin Jefferson a lot of money and still fill out your team, which is you couldn't really do quite as well if you had re-signed Kirk Cousins. So like that, you have the ability to make it happen. And I think there's been no indication that Justin Jefferson wants to be somewhere else. And even now that Kirk Cousins is gone, I think he really likes and respects Kevin O'Connell and what the Vikings are building here and understands the vision of what they've done this offseason. I don't think there's any reason to believe he just wants to run off and go to New York or Miami or something like that. So I would just tell everybody, deep breaths, patience. I think this is going to get done. There will come a point in time where that might change, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think everyone could probably, just whether you're watching this for the first time or if you watch live streams or anything else over the last how many months, sense my frustration with the NFL media machine in general and the social media machine that just churns out things that are completely bogus. Yeah. Just keep this in mind. There is no indication whatsoever that he's ever wanted to be traded, that he's ever asked to be traded, that the team has ever considered trading him, or that anyone has ever considered on either side not signing. The fact that they had negotiations last year is much more of an indication that everybody wants this to happen. Everybody knows that the price is going to be high. They just have to figure out all the details to it. And yet still, every time it comes up, it's, should they trade Jefferson? Who are they trading Jefferson to? Here's him in a Chargers jersey. It's just like, get a life, okay? But again, that doesn't move the needle. I won't rant on it anymore because we've got a very important couple other things to talk about. Number one, we didn't see any kicking today. Very disappointing. Broke my heart. So no update on the kicking competition.
We saw some punting, though.
Did see some punting. Oh, yeah. You want to talk about the punter? Why don't we talk about the punter for like 30 seconds?
Yeah, that's a good period of time.
Is Ryan Wright going to be the punter?
I don't know if he is because Matt Daniels came out today and fully admitted what the numbers show, which is that he was not very good last year. He was great as a rookie, sensation, undrafted guy. He wasn't very good last year, the touchback rate and all that stuff. So they brought in a guy, Seth Vernon, who you probably haven't heard of unless you're following this team extremely closely. And he's the punting competition. And I'm not a punting expert, but he was punting the heck out of the ball today. Seth Vernon was getting really a huge leg. And Ryan Wright was not really. And Ryan Wright, I mean, he has a huge leg. I don't want to speak too definitively on that because maybe he was trying to do certain punts so that aren't you're just kicking the heck out of the ball. But I don't know. Punting competition, eyes emoji. Keep an eye out.
That's as much as I'm going to talk about the punting thing, other than punting competition, eyes emoji. let's talk about left guard, though. Left guard, a very serious topic of interest from Vikings fans. Blake Brandel is the guy. I don't see anybody else rotating with him. He took every single first-team rep, and then Wes Phillips practically hugged Blake Brandel and named himself Wes Phillips Brandel after the press conference. He was as enthusiastic about Blake Brandel at left guard as we've heard anyone be about a left guard here in a very long time. Did Wes Phillips's enthusiastic press conference regarding the left guard give you more confidence about this behemoth of a man, former Oregon State tackle, than you had before this practice today?
Not really. We go to so many of these press conferences, and it's hard to know what's real because coaches are always going to talk up their guys, especially in May. And yeah, Wes Phillips had a lot of good things to say about Blake Brandel, how he's stepped in for them at various different positions. I mean, he came in at left tackle for Darisaw before. He's played guard. I think he's played right tackle. And he's played fairly well. And the numbers and the tape does support that. It hasn't been amazing. There's been some inconsistency. But the key thing that he said was that he has earned this opportunity. And that seems to be what the coaching staff believes and what the front office believes, because they haven't brought in anybody to even remotely make a case for opposing him and even competing for that spot as of now. So they seem to have the confidence in him. It's hard to know how much of that is, wow, we really think this guy's going to be an awesome starting left guard, and how much of it is, well, there weren't a ton of options out there, and we kind of spent our money elsewhere on defense and a few other spots. So, but Blake Brandel. So I don't know. We'll see.
All right, the way I would look at it is what they say and what they do. If they align, then I believe it's the truth.
Yeah.
And what they did was they didn't bring in anybody else. Dan Feeney is kind of an Austin Schlottman type. He's clearly a backup type of player. He's a center/guard, but you wouldn't be asking him to start at guard for an entire season. When he's done that, it hasn't gone very well throughout his career. Brandel is someone that they have raved about for several years now, and that makes me think that intelligence-wise, the way that he picks up the offense, the techniques, the way he fits within the group, that all of that is making sense to them as someone who looks like they should be a starter. If Blake Brandel starts and struggles, then of course we're all going to go, hey, wasn't it somebody else that you should have signed? And personally, look, they have enough cap space that you'd like to see 3 to 4 other people compete for this job, other than just saying, hey, it's yours, buddy. We're big fans. It's 17 games that you need this player to play. He's played almost 3, and that's not enough of a sample to be able to tell. Pre-camp signings, I would have liked to have seen them by now. This could be it, though. This could very well be it, and he could be left guard number 1. But to not see anybody else even going into that position today made it very clear that they believe that he is going to be a solid starting left guard for them, and their interior, their offensive line will remain until we're all dead. A big question for this franchise. I mean, when will it be? The year 2074. So if you have a child today, they will see a left guard they believe in their lifetime. No, I truly don't know. Here's what I do know, though, about Blake Brandel is development is a massive deal with offensive line. He's been developing. He's been on the bench, mixing in over several seasons. When we see rookies get thrown in, we see that development on the fly, and a lot of times it's really ugly. My expectation would be then that they've seen this development behind the scenes and they believe in it. That's the best I can do, though. It still is going to be weird if they go into the first week of training camp with nobody else fighting it out with someone who's never started before.
And I suppose we should briefly just mention the name Dalton Risner, who is still unsigned, and just I'd love to know what like the conversations with him and his agent and like other teams have been like the last 2 off seasons, because nobody signed him last year until the Vikings got him for like $4 million in September, and then he was fine and did well enough that they were cool trading Ezra Cleveland and was pretty solid in pass protection, and everybody loved him because he's a great quote and he's runs downfield after the play. He was all right for a starting left guard. And then he's still unsigned this year, too. He's like, I thought he wasn't going to do that again because he didn't want to do that again just from talking to him. But now he's still unsigned. So I don't really know what the deal is there. I don't think that he's coming back to Minnesota unless it's like September again and they're like, hey, you want $3 million? So I don't know. We'll see what happens there. That's just a weird situation to me. I think Blake Brandel, for now, is going to get every opportunity to show that he can be the guy if when the bullets start flying, proverbially, and they start putting pads on and hitting each other and training camp and doing one-on-ones and doing team drills where you got to go against Harrison Phillips and there's not a lot of great there's not a lot of great defensive tackles to prove yourself against on this team in training camp.
You should look decent, really.
Yeah, you should be. You might look fine, but if he doesn't, or for whatever reason, then maybe they pivot and they add somebody else. But for now, he's going to get the chance to be the left guard here.
Well, let's talk about just some other little notes, things that I noticed or you noticed. Andre Carter getting work with the ones because Andrew Van Ginkel is still recovering from an injury, so he's not out there practicing. Lucky Jackson, I thought, stood out, and Tristan Jackson ahead of him on the depth chart. Thayer Thomas had a good day, so that wide receiver battle should be interesting. But as far as sorting out the depth chart, Jalen Naylor and Tristan Jackson were more with the starters. Mm-hmm. Lucky Jackson, Thayer Thomas more with the other guys. So that's where
Brandon Powell,
stand
Trent
there.
Sherfield,
Yep.
A lot of guys mixing in.
Yep. A lot of wide receivers
Jefferson
running around. Nobody knows what's going to happen.
Jordan
with
Addison still looks very good.
He does.
He had a couple of nice plays today.
Assume that he was going to be good at football still.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anything else to you?
Any
other notes?
No, I mean it's hard again where it's not a whole lot of I can't tell you much about trench guys or anything like that because they're not making contact today, or like the running game where it's like every time they hand off they always sneak through and run the whole way, and it's like that. I don't know if that was a big gain or if that was really a 2-yard gain.
They were averaging 40 yards a carry out there. It was insane.
And that's how it always is throughout training camp, and that I understand why they do that. We were over by the outside linebackers because kind of where we were situated watching practice when they were going through their individual drills, and Dallas Turner looks the part. He is a large human with long arms, and I don't know. You mentioned it. He was mixing in a little bit with some of the starting defense. Just seems to me like he's a guy who, especially maybe with Van Ginkel missing a little time this offseason, like Turner is going to hit the ground running and have a really big role. And then also Gabriel Murphy was standing next to him, the undrafted edge rusher out of UCLA, and you're like, oh, he looks good, but his arms are like a foot shorter than Dallas Turner's, and you understand that's like the one reason why this guy didn't get drafted. I still think he has a chance to be not necessarily Ivan Pace level, but a steal of an undrafted free agent with just the tape and the production. But it's going to be a real litmus test of like how good can you be in the NFL when you have very short arms for the edge rusher position. So we'll see if he can overcome that.
I have short arms.
I do too.
I'm like that. I'm a short arm person.
We're not outside linebackers.
No,
though.
we're not. I don't think there's any football position that I could actually do anything in. But a couple other things I thought of. Harrison Smith, we talked to him for the first time since he returned.
Yep.
And when we talk about Brian Flores and the reverence for him, it's real. I mean, it's one reason that Harrison Smith said he came back. He said, we speak the same language. Working with him, he learned a lot about football, which at this point, how much can Harrison Smith learn about football? That connection between Flores and Harrison Smith is something meaningful there that they built last year, and that he's really enjoyed working with Metellus and Bynum, and that unit's going to come along. Shaq Griffin, I thought, looked pretty good out there. I mean, whatever, talk about a practice, but he looked like a player out there.
He hit a pick on a deep ball.
He was out with the ones a lot. Mekhi Blackman on the outside, that rotation, if Griffin plays with the first team, and then you have Blackman and also Byron Murphy on the inside, could be kind of interesting. And we'll end with this. Matt Daniels and I have something in common, that both of us are very excited about the return of the kickoff. He pointed out that years ago, maybe only 10, 15 years ago, 80% of the kickoffs are being returned, and last year was like 20%. Now, Kene Nwangwu could be a star. as their kickoff returner. They could use multiple guys. They're teaching this on the fly, and I can't wait to see it, even in just the first preseason games. When we do our what to watch in this preseason game, number 1 will be if J.J. McCarthy plays. Number 2 will be what does this kickoff look like for me? That's going to be my thing. I'm extremely intrigued. This is going to change the NFL and just how the game begins. He called it ceremonial, and that's a great word for it. Now it's a play, and the Vikings have one of the best guys at doing this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. I assume most people know what we're talking about, that they've adopted the XFL kickoff where, like, your guys start 10 yards away from the other guy, so you're not running down and hitting each other and getting the same level of those injuries that happen on those plays. And so it changes a lot where it's when you're covering, you need guys who can get off blocks, and when you're setting up, you need guys who can make those blocks, and there's going to be a lot of strategy going into it. And I think the Vikings, having Kene Wangu, who has obviously proven himself to be a great kick returner, but being a running back and some of the things that go into that position, and with the way that this is going to translate, I think that's valuable because you have to read the blocks and set them up and be able to explode past them. So yeah, that's going to be fun to watch. I think the Harrison Smith press conference today was an interesting one that people could go watch, where he's talking about the decision to come back for another year, and now he was just kind of chilling, and then he was like, oh wait, free agency's coming up. I think I'm doing this, and he restructured his deal, and he's excited to be back with Flores and Metellus and Bynum and all these guys. And then the one other thing that I just popped in my head was Wes Phillips saying that they really like Robert Tonyan. And
he was excited.
He wowed them at their workout, and they all looked around. They're like, "Yeah, we're signing this guy."
He looked good to me.
And he talked to him. He did look good today. He had the nice back shoulder catch from Mullins, and the way Wes Phillips talked about him, I'm almost like, is he going to be playing a lot while T.J. Hawkinson's out, like more than Johnny Munt maybe? Because
he's a catcher. He's a pass catcher.
He's a pass catcher. He had 11 touchdowns back in 2020 playing with Aaron Rodgers, and yeah, I think that is a guy to watch for not only making this team, but maybe having a pretty decent role in the 4 to 6 to 8 games that we're anticipating T.J. Hawkinson's going to miss.
Also, Wes kind of saying the quiet part out loud about Hawkinson's not going to be back for week 1. I think we're getting a very clear indication of that. So
I think the earliest is probably after the bye, which is in week 5. So
there you have it. From TCO Performance Center. Lots to discuss every time we get out here for an OTA.
And the Wolves
practice.
are in the Western Conference Finals.
Well, they are?
Yeah, they are.
Oh, I haven't noticed. No one in Minnesota has mentioned it. I did write an article, by the way, about all the things the Vikings should take away from the way the Wolves were built. Why don't we do that? Why don't we do just your connect? I wrote an article about it, so I thought of all the things that there's connection.
2 number 1 overall draft picks.
Well, that tanking works. Vikings fans told me it doesn't, but I don't know. I guess you can't cheer for the Wolves to win then because they had to get number 1 picks.
We could have a whole conversation about, would you rather been the Vikings over the last 20 years where you get to some NFC championship games but never win anything, but you're like, they've won basically, they win at least 7 games every year except for like the one Leslie Frazier year in 2011. Or would you rather be the Wolves where you were horrible for the vast majority of the last 20 years, but now you've reached the round that Minnesota sports teams have stopped at since 1991, and you look to have the best chance that anyone's had since the 2009 Vikings to get past this hump and get to an actual championship series or game. So I don't know. I think he might rather be the Wolves, but I don't know. They were real bad for a while.
I don't think that anybody ever straps on the cleats or the shoes, the Jordan basketball shoes, or turns on the lights in the arena, or goes into their office to grind the tape with the goal of winning 8 games, or with the goal of winning 30 games, or whatever, or being just good enough for people to come to your games and for you not to collapse as a franchise. They do it for championships. So no matter what means it took, no matter how long it took to get to the point where you can legitimately be on the doorstep of a championship, means so much more to me. I would throw out every single Vikings first round playoff season where it was kind of fun. I would trade them all for 2-win seasons for one chance to go to the Super Bowl and have a real chance. That's the way I look at it. Not everybody does, but I just think that you exist to try to compete for Super Bowls or NBA finals. Like, you don't do it to just sort of be around and exist for people to go to your games.
I agree. And we've been talking about that for a while. And that's why I think we both were very on board with the decision to let Kirk Cousins move on and to take some swings here, because it's hard to compare those sports where the Timberwolves got 2 number 1 overall picks, and those guys can have such an outsized impact on a basketball game. But there's a slight similarity when you're talking about trading up 1 spot for J.J. McCarthy as the 10th overall pick, and then Kwesi's the take the Clark Kent glasses off quote about trading some of those future picks and going to get Dallas Turner and an impact guy who you think you can build around. And maybe he could be the Jaden McDaniels of the draft class to J.J. McCarthy's Anthony Edwards. I don't know. But, I think that approach of not settling for just being right in the middle anymore. And the Vikings might be pretty bad this year. But then, you know what? They kept their first-round pick next year, and so they could use that again.
But that's part of the point, right? I mean, I would be totally fine with a season that doesn't go very well for this team right now if the long term is them being much better down the road. And one of my biggest takeaways, I'll just give you 2 of them real quick. One of them was you got to sense the moment. And Tim Connolly for the Wolves, he sensed the moment. Like, this is my time to go acquire a star player that is going to give us a chance to compete with the Denver Nuggets. And they did. I mean, you talk about a plan coming together. Yeah. They end up playing the Nuggets. They end up having the right combination of players to slow that offense down just enough for one half of basketball in Game 7 to win to go to the Western Conference Finals. But that trade was not looked upon favorably. It was not looked upon favorably for a year until but they took their shot. Mm-hmm. And I always think if you fail taking your big shot, I'm okay with that because you tried, rather than just sitting around and hoping that a miracle happens. The other thing I like about the Wolves is that they're built different. And I think being different in sports is good. It gives you an edge. Mm-hmm. And I did wonder what about this team would be different. And I don't have an answer. I want to see them come up with an answer. But the Gobert Towns thing is very different from anything we see in modern NBA basketball. What is it about this team that's going to be different? It's got to be, you got to find something.
The Vikings?
Yeah, you got to find something that makes you different, standing out schematically, roster build wise, whatever, from everybody else to give you a chance.
I think Brian Flores' defense is is different.
I like that.
They blitz more than anybody. They drop 8 more than anybody.
I like that.
So that's the one that jumps out. I mean, I think having the best wide receiver in football gives you a little bit of a different edge to your passing game. But yeah, I think the Wolves are unique. Like, not every team has to be kind of zig where others have zagged to win at a high level, but the Wolves have done it and it worked really well, and it helped that they found Naz Reid as an undrafted free agent. That's their Ivan Pace Jr., I suppose. And then they absolutely fleeced when they got Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker in a trade for D'Angelo Russell. But now I'm just getting too far into the basketball side. I don't have a football comparison for that. But if you can fleece teams in trades, do it.
There's a final piece element to Mike Conley, though. There's a culture element, there's a chemistry, all that matters. As far as being different, though, I think we can go look at some of the construction. Sometimes it's just your star is different. Jokic is different. Giannis is different. You don't have answers for those types of players. And with Flores, I like that answer is what's most different about them right now. The fact that you can have a number 1 wide receiver catch 100 passes but average 16 yards a reception or whatever Jefferson averages, 15, 16, that's different. That the amount that they can push him downfield versus a lot of other top receivers, there's almost, unless it was the teams with LeBron. But outside of them, even how different was Golden State when they first blew up on the scene with their ball movement and their 3-point shooting and all those things. So that's what are the football equivalents.
The Vikings safety room is different. They play the different. 3 safeties and they use all those guys, and they have these complementary skill sets. So I think the Brian Flores hire has proven to be a great thing, but in basketball, football, and whatever sport, it's your stars, and they need J.J. McCarthy ideally to become that guy if they're going to kind of have a championship ceiling, and they think that it's possible, so that's why they drafted him.
Well, they're not there today, but we're going to watch them progress, including next Wednesday when we're back out here for another OTA. But there will be lots of podcasts in between, so make sure that you keep it locked to this old channel here. So thanks, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Will, and we'll catch you next time.
Yes, sir.
Football.